every war with Israel was not desired or started or instigated by the Israelis, but by the Arab world. You're not guaranteed your freedom because of the uncontrolled waves of immigrants who come not necessarily because they identify with Western values, but because they want to change Europe or the West in general. I think we should all reconsider our positions in life, how much we've contributed, and we should roll our sleeves up and try to fight against this Islamist agenda.
Estamos acá con Rawan Osman. Ella es una activista siria de Lebanon también y que se mudó a Alemania. Y ahora nos va a contar un poco de su historia. Okay, so tell us, Rawan, how is your story? How did you end up in Germany?
How did I end up in Israel is even more interesting. So I'm half Syrian, half Lebanese. My father is from Damascus. My mom is from the Bekaa Valley, and I grew up in a very anti-Semitic surrounding, which is quite common in the Arab world. I attended a French Catholic school in Lebanon, and later in my mid-20s, I moved to France, and in Europe, I lived among the Jews, which helped me understand how intensively brainwashed and indoctrinated against Israel and the Jews and the Zionists. And I started reading the history of our region. For example, we learned that the Jews came from Eastern Europe. But when you read about the Jews, you realize something that is quite simple and obvious. Where do we, in the Arab world, read mostly about the Jews?
In the Quran.
In the Quran,
Yeah.
but also in the Bible. We don't have Jews at all in most Arab countries, but we have a lot of Christians. I mean, they're getting less and less because they are driven out. But those who were completely driven out are the Jews, so they were not present to contest whatever the state taught us about them. Living among them, I realized something fantastic. Guess what? They're normal people. And I realized something that made me upset, even angry for a long time. That our side was the aggressor. Every war with Israel was not desired or started or instigated by the Israelis, but by the Arab world. So you have to feel a moral obligation when thousands, and this is an understatement, lost their lives because the Muslims believe the so-called Palestine is theirs and theirs only. I just realized this is not true.
How did you went against your own religion and your own people when you realized that? What did you do?
It's not necessarily going against my own people or my own religion. I grew up in a secular milieu, middle class. People were tolerant, liberal. So I don't have anything against them. I have a lot against the Palestinian cause and the damage it caused mostly in the Middle East, because my parents' generation has war trauma, just like our generation and their parents. And this is quite common in Lebanon, in Syria, and also in Israel. Also in Palestinian culture, trauma, tragedy, drama, suffering became an essential part of their identity. That is what I have a problem with. And I left the Middle East because it's too much to fight. It's almost a lost cause, I thought. So I moved to Europe. I landed in Germany, for which I'm grateful because I learned intensively an important chapter of Jewish history. And living in Germany, the fact that we received most of the refugees coming from the Middle East, most of which are anti-Semitic, reminded me that I do have a moral obligation, and it's not enough to move abroad to forget about the Middle East and its problems. We have to fight against it because they tend to follow you and insist on helping you, on making you a Muslim. So there is nowhere on planet Earth where you can leave and leave the entire problems of the Middle East behind. It's part of our identity and it will chase us no matter what we do.
And what do you think if people leave the Middle East to Europe and they want to transform Europe in the Middle East. What are the dangers with that?
But that is exactly what I'm saying. Even if you do not identify with this culture and you move abroad, we're talking about Europe because I live there, but also if you move to Australia or to Canada, because you want to live in a liberal Western democracy, you're not guaranteed your freedom because of the uncontrolled waves of immigrants who come not necessarily because they identify with Western values, but because they want to change Europe or the West in general. Now, many of them go because the economy in those countries is good. So they come to exploit the economic system and the freedom granted by these democracies in order to push forward Islamist agendas. So there are many immigrants who mean well, who want a better chance, an opportunity to build a better future, but they are infiltrated by many, many, many who want to bring the system down from within. And it is not a secret. I think it is available on the internet for anyone who wants to see. Even in countries such as the Netherlands or Germany where I live, or the UK or France, there are masses who raised even the ISIS flag, demanding a caliphate to be erected in the West.
Law.
People advocating Sharia law in countries such as France or the UK. And today, even in America, this is not something that is distant. For Mamdani to win the mayoral race in New York, I think America's following suit, following in the footsteps of Europe, and this is truly concerning. New York is not like Hamburg or Amsterdam. It's one of the largest cities in America, and it has a huge Jewish community. And in spite of that, in the time where we see a tsunami of Jew hatred, Mamdani, who's anti-Israel, wins the race. So I think we should all reconsider our positions in life, how much we've contributed, and we should roll our sleeves up and try to fight against this Islamist agenda. I'm not saying that Mamdani has an Islamist agenda, not necessarily, but we've seen this bizarre mariage d'affaires between the far left, the radical left,
Socialist.
and the Islamists. So, I don't know. I think we're facing hard times.
And how do you, with your activism and your social media, are fighting this and try to differentiate between the Islamists and the Arab world? Because your audience, sometimes they speak Arabic and sometimes they speak English. How are the messaging different, and how do you think it's making an impact?
Most Arabs are not allowed to speak to Israelis. Most Arabs have never spoken to a Jew. And that is because we have laws forbidding contact with Israelis or Jews. Social media allows us to break the walls and to fight against the systematic dehumanizing, especially of Israelis. And after October 7th, we realized it's not only against Israeli Jews, it's against any Israeli who is proud of their Israeli identity. You can be a Muslim wearing hijab. Hamas will not spare your life if you are integrated in this country. And I say this standing in Jerusalem. So I think nowadays, from my experience after 2 years on social media and the comments we read, the patterns we detected, there are Arabs who are waking up, who understand that the problem is not necessarily Israel in our region. For example, when you appeal to Arabs who live in an Arab country, suffering from pollution, from violence, from crime, from corruption, etc., poverty, unemployment, they do understand that Israel is not causing their suffering in life. It is bad governance in their countries. Arabs who are persecuted by leadership which claims to be invested in the freedoms and the human rights of the Palestinians understand that the leadership is lying to them. Because if you're interested in human rights, you should prioritize your own people. So if the Islamic Republic in Iran or the Syrian president, former and current, for example, or even the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, if they claim that they're interested in the human rights of their people while abusing their own people, the human rights of the Palestinians while abusing their own people, I think Arabs started waking up thanks to social media and to internet.
And also when you talk about they caring about Palestinians, they talk about caring about Palestinians, but at the end of the day, they're not taking refugees from the Palestinians. And it's not only that they don't want to be good with them, it's like every time there's Palestinians in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Syria, there's a problem. Can you tell us more about what happened with the king of Jordan, like the one who was killed by Palestinians, and also how Palestinians infiltrated and made a civil war in Lebanon?
Let's make a distinction between a few themes that you mentioned here. If we're talking about Palestinian refugees after October 7th, the situation is surreal because very few countries around the world accepted to give them a haven. And that is also caused by Hamas officials urging Arab countries not to allow any refugees in their countries, especially Egypt, claiming that Israel wants to transfer them out of the Gaza Strip because it was a conspiracy. The entire war started because Israel wanted to take Gaza, which is nonsensical. The war was started by Hamas. That is to address this issue. Palestinian refugees or the Gazan refugees, very few were allowed out of Gaza. When you talk about Palestinians in general, the conditions under which Palestinian refugees live in Lebanon since decades is unbelievable. They are mistreated mostly in Arab countries. So many Palestinians who live in the West Bank or in Gaza do not understand that they would be living much, much, much worse in Lebanon, for example. And that has many reasons as well. So the Palestinian leadership contributed to that reality. When it comes to Palestinians going against regimes that welcomed them, yes, there are few precedents. One you just mentioned in Jordan, but the Palestinian leadership abused a few Arab countries' hospitality. To name a few examples, Kuwait, Jordan, Lebanon, and they were eventually driven out because they tried to take over, because they expect much more from the leadership of the countries where they live, and they want access to an army. They'd like armies to help them fight against Israel. So that makes Arab countries very wary and careful before they welcome large numbers of Palestinians. They have a bad record, so to say. That brings us back to the fact that violence and the glorification of martyrdom being part of the Palestinian culture, it damages the Palestinians above all. They need to get rid of this mindset, of this attitude. They owe it to their children before worrying about the damage they're causing to Israelis or in the Middle East. For their children to have a better future, they need to reassess their choices and their worldview and their attitude towards life. And that is not to mention the religious aspect, just as human beings on a human level, reassessing their history since they started this project, since Palestinianism became a thing, and do a check balance. What have they achieved and what is the damage they've done, above all, to themselves?
Thank you so much, Rawan.
Thank you. Thank you.